Hello, friends. Hello, my friends. Good to have you back here once again on Improv and Magic. I'm LD Madeira, and I'm super excited about today's episode. Today, I got to talk to one of the most respected and celebrated names in magic. He's the most versatile magician in the world. He is Dan Harlan. Dan has invented, performed, and taught magic more than any other magician ever. In fact, he even updated the entire Tarbell Course in Magic, which is an 8-volume encyclopedia containing over 1,200 tricks. Dan is one of the most innovative modern magicians, and his cutting-edge miracles have delighted audiences in over 20 countries around the world. He has been featured at Caesar's Magical Empire in Las Vegas, headlined at the world-famous Magic Castle in Hollywood, and guest starred at Masters of Magic in Saint-Vincent, Italy. Dan has also consulted for top professional magicians, including Kevin James, Jeff McBride, Keith Barry, and David Copperfield. He is also co-founder of the Mystic Tower, which produces brand new mind-blowing magic. My friends, if you love magic, you're definitely going to love what Dan Harlan has to say. Whether you're a magician or not, you're going to be amazed by all of the incredible wisdom shared in this interview. In fact, I think there's also things here that improvisers can learn as well. Listening to Dan was like listening to a master professor. So get ready, because you're about to be blown away by my guest, Dan Harlan. My friends, this is absolutely very exciting because I'm talking today to the most versatile magician in the world. Please welcome the living legend himself, Mr. Dan Harlan. Hello, Dan. How are you doing today?
Yeah. Hey, LD. I'm good. It's always nice to be reminded that I'm a living legend. The living part is the important part.
Absolutely. Well, no one can see what I'm seeing because this is an audio podcast, but I'm seeing you, and you look like you're sitting in what I'm assuming is your private library.
And it's legit. That's not a backdrop. These are real books.
About how many books do you have back there, out of curiosity?
All of them.
All
you can't see. Okay, look, I'm not going to bother turning the camera since nobody else can see. But
Right.
So what you can see there, and then the shelves go that way, and then they go along this wall here, and I've absolutely lost track. And I'll be honest with you, I've read most of these. Some of them belong to my fiance, Sarah Ella Fant. And most of those are down kind of here. I haven't had a chance to read those yet.
Any of them your particular favorites?
Actually, it was funny because I just looked at this again today. This is the 7 Laws of Magical Thinking. Now, you would think that that's maybe a magic book, but you obviously haven't heard of it if you're just into reading magic books. This isn't a magic book. This is a philosophical book. And it's all about how people in general deal with the mundane aspects of their day-to-day life by coming up with magical reasons for things. And I find it really fascinating because we as performers can use that to tap in to the psyche to make what we do actually more magical. One of my favorites, and I use it all the time, is an object that has the energy from a previous owner. So think about, somebody that's famous, let's say Jimi Hendrix's guitar, everybody think that that's much more valuable than other guitars that would be, even like a new guitar that would be similar in actual, like real value, but the resale value of Jimi Hendrix guitar would be much, much greater. But even if it wasn't about monetary value, just people would cherish his guitar over a different guitar that was just off the shelf or whatever. So, and they're technically could be identical guitars that have absolutely no difference to them, whatever. But because he possessed one, it it makes a big difference to people. So that's kind of magical thinking. So if you introduce an object, either that it belonged to somebody, and you can tell a story about it that makes sense, or if you're fortunate enough to get a legitimate, cherished object from somebody, that's even better. Now you have a connection that resonates with people.
3.5 minutes and my mind has already been blown. I love that. I love this whole talking about adding the whole psychological aspect and the whole sentimentality, if that's a word, into
Sure.
magic. Do you find that that's a very crucial component of the magic that you do?
For me, absolutely. I think it should be for everyone. And I know it may seem kind of trite when I give some examples, but two of my favorite things to perform in my act are Hold It Buster and Starkle. And Hold It Buster is it's a trick. It's a Jumbo Monty card trick that I came up with when I was 14 years old. So I've been doing it for about at least 5 years now. Um, and and that particular trick is a story about how my father would show it to me to get me to do my chores around the house. So without this script to it, it it could just fall into the category of just another card trick, just another Monty trick, and even just another jumbo Monty tricks. And there are many in the categories. But because I've taken the time to actually give it a backstory and relate it to something in my life, and then put some real things into the script and written it in a way that people can relate to, it elevates it beyond just being a card trick. It motivates everything that I do, and it makes people pay attention and care regardless of their age. So it resonates for everybody, from young kids all the way through all adults, and it can be performed in absolutely any venue under really any circumstances because it's got a human element to it. So I think that that's really important. And then the other one is Starkle, and the reason I bring them up together is because that one is written about my mom. And I tell a story about that. And if you're not familiar with Starkle, that's where I tear a napkin. It's just a napkin. There's nothing fancy about it. I tear a napkin so that I'm tearing a circular opening out of it. And then that piece that I tear out, that circle that's torn out, changes into a star while it's being held by someone. And and I invented that when I was, I guess maybe around the same time, but I didn't really work on it and I didn't really use it for a couple of years. Um, and when I first came up with it, it was a mathematical trick. It's all about geometry, and I used to present it that way, that it was all about the way you fold the paper and the geometry of it, and it really didn't ever. I mean, it was just a cute little trick. It didn't really ever go anywhere. And then a good friend of mine, Scott Wells, uh, saw it and asked if he could perform it in his show. And he gave it a script about wishing on a star.
Mm.
And he used, When You Wish Upon a Star for the musical background behind it. And when I saw what he did with it, I was immediately, like hit in the head by a brick, and thought to myself, well, I why didn't I come up with something? Why didn't I think about the symbolism that's inherent in it? And so I set about the task of writing it so that it had symbolism and also had a human element to it. And so I wrote it about a night when my mom and I are sitting on the back porch of my family's house, and the moon is rising up and the stars are twinkling into view. And my mom teaches me the poem that you recite when you wish on the first star, starlight, star bright. And so all of that is interwoven into it. And now, using just a napkin, it plays as one of the strongest pieces in my show. As a matter of fact, it's closed my show for the last 30 years. It's that good. So don't discount adding in those kinds of resonant themes, using connecting on a human level, and working psychologically with things that people understand, because otherwise, magic just gets reduced to a series of tricks that kind of show off skill, and people can only take so much of that. I prefer for them to actually get to know me and relate to me, and I prefer for them to know that I have these feelings and emotions and thoughts and all of that kind of stuff.
Man, I love that. I love that so much. There are a lot of magicians who focus on what the audience sees, but I love it when a magician also focuses on what the audience feels. And that sounds like that's a big, important thing for you as well.
Yeah, critical to me. I mean, even if I am performing something that can be reduced to a simple trick, I still want people to feel something, and I want them to see me feel things. So I started in acting. My background is in stage, and I was on stage when I was 2 years old, and I was involved in plays and musicals and all kinds of theater. I didn't learn my first magic trick until I was 9 years old. So I had a formative experience of 7 years of theater, and through that I came to understand that the audience only experiences what an actor is able to bring to the part. Uh, so the actor has to experience something, some emotion, some transformation, something like that. And I see a lot of magic shows, and the magician never changes or never experiences any difference in emotion. They stay at the same tempo and the same volume and the same. So in my show, there's a texture. When you meet me as the magician, you actually are experiencing what it would be like if I were a real magician, and there are certain emotions that I go through on the journey with people when I talk about some of the things that I've already mentioned, or when I'm just doing a simple trick. I mean, I actually care as I'm relating to the audience what's about to happen. So you'll see me get excited, or you'll see me be a little curious and uncertain about things, or you'll see me being surprised and laughing for something that somebody else does. And I should mention that last idea of laughing with a person from the audience comes from my good friend Jeff McBride, where he does a routine with a young child up on stage. It's his Miser's Dream, and it's planned so that the kid ends up making him laugh. So I said, well, that's great. I can add that little piece into something, because look at that. Look at, isn't it great how you can make an audience like you if one of them gets up and does something that makes you genuinely happy. And so I've worked that into my things as well. And I just love the idea of that. And again, I mean, I'm saying a lot of things all together. But one of the things that I think magicians miss out on is having somebody on stage that is not merely a participant, and not merely there to hold props, and not merely there to make fun of. When I get somebody on stage, they are an active part. They have a role to play, and they get all of the credit on stage for playing the role that they're doing and doing really well in that role on stage. And I find that makes the audience really want to become a part of it. When I go to the next person to get on stage, they are excited and ready and willing. They know that they're not going to be made fun of or picked on or made to look a fool or any of that kind of stuff. So all of these things just come from an understanding of relating to people through the lens of a theatrical presentation.
So you make them part of the story.
Absolutely. Yeah. Whatever it is that I'm doing, I always think about how I can establish this premise and how I can make the players come to life. So, and you would normally think of them as characters, but I like to think of them as the players. Like I'm one of the players, and whoever I get on stage is a player, and some of my props are personified, and they become players as well. So I try to find ways where they interact in lively, interesting, and satisfying ways.
Where did you grow up, and what was growing up like for you?
Yes, well, as you could probably tell, I haven't fully grown up. So,
Neither have
but
I. Neither have I.
yeah, but I was born right here on planet Earth. It's the only home I've ever known, and I enjoy every part of it that I can get to. As far as my specific birthplace, a tiny town called Fremont, Ohio, and I liked it. It was it was a nice place to grow up. It was a little bit more progressive than you would expect for a small town in Ohio. So, that's why I was, always involved in theater and that kind of stuff. My parents were awesome people. My dad was a part-time professional musician, and they were both active in theater. And so, it was really nice, but it was a little bit too isolated once I started to develop my worldview and what I wanted to express, and the fact that I wanted to be a professional magician and travel the world. So as soon as I got a chance to, I set out on my own, and I spent 25 years traveling all over the world. And it was kind of sad. I hadn't seen my parents in 25 years until I went back to visit them after all that time. But I had really established myself, throughout the world.
So it sounds like you were born into performing.
Yes, although I was the only one that took to it. I have three siblings, and only one of them is involved in performing. She actually manages her husband, who's a country western singer. But my other siblings, they didn't get bitten by the stage bug. I definitely did.
So were you certain ever since a young age that performing was definitely the thing that you wanted to do?
Mm, I had a lot of other interests, and it wasn't 100% sure what I was going to pursue. I'm also a fine artist, so I learned painting and drawing and all of that kind of stuff at a very young age, and I did a lot of art competitions and had quite a few awards, but I knew that it wasn't going to be an easy road to go with fine arts, so I became a graphic designer. And I was making a lot of money as a graphic designer concurrent with performing magic. So I had two professions. And eventually, both of them were starting to take up all of my time. I mean, it was really difficult to juggle the two of them. So I had to make a decision which one I was going to pursue. And I decided to go with magic because it afforded me the best opportunity to travel. Travel is something I always wanted to do. And I had other interests. Like I said, I toyed around with the idea of being a lawyer for a short period of time, because I like to talk, and I'm pretty good at research and writing and all of the things that are necessary there. But I just decided against it because I can only tell the truth. That's what it comes down to. And honestly, it's funny that I say that, because a lot of people think magicians only lie, but not in my show. I have some fiction in there that's dramatic fiction, but in there is the truth.
Wow, I really love that. Well, how did you discover magic? What was it that made you say, I want to be a magician?
It was kind of wild, because I grew up seeing a lot of magicians. The grade school that I went to in that tiny town, the principal of that school was an amateur magician. I didn't know that. He was a member of the magic club that was in that area, and he just happened to have connections to book every touring act that was doing school shows at that time. And at that time, that was big business. Just about everybody was doing a school show. So I saw a ton of great magicians, and we legitimately had probably 4 magicians a year while I was growing up, and that's kind of unheard of in these days. And there were always interesting school assemblies, but those I think were the most fascinating. And I also, like I said, I was on stage, and I hadn't put together the idea that a magician was an actor. I didn't realize that they were the same thing. I actually was completely awed by magicians to the point where I felt like they were real. They were doing something that wasn't theater. I didn't realize it was the same thing. But then one day, a counselor at that school taught me a magic trick, and it was a rubber band trick, and then said that if I wanted to learn more, I could just go to the library and check out magic books that were there. And that's when I finally realized that wow, wait a second, oh, what I've been watching this whole time has been acting, has been drama. There's a script behind it. There's a method behind it. There are props behind it. All of that kind of stuff. So that was kind of cool. And then about concurrently with that, a friend of mine in the same grade, that was in the third grade when I was 9 years old, he performed a one-ahead mind reading trick. So he was asking kids what they wanted for Christmas to write it down, and then he would be able to tell you without unfolding this piece of paper. And that was before that counselor had taught me that trick. So I had no idea, how he did it. And then the counselor taught me this rubber band trick, said it was in a book. I went back to my friend and I said, how did you do that thing? I felt comfortable asking him now. And he said, well, he read it in the library. So I had two people telling me to go to the library, and that's where I spent all my time from that point on.
It's funny, as I'm hearing you talk about this, I'm being reminded of that famous quote by Robert Houdin that he was the one who said, I am an actor playing the part of someone who could do real magic. Do you feel that it's necessary for magicians to remind themselves that they're also actors as well?
Well, I think it's critically important if you want to have an impact, if you want to be any good as a magician, you really have to be aware that you are part of the performing arts. And as being part of the performing arts, there's an art to it. So you ought to understand what's necessary for that art to be done properly. And so there are certain tools and skill sets that are all part of the performing arts. And every single one of them can make your performance better, from understanding script writing, from understanding blocking, understanding building props, from costuming to music, to stagecraft, knowing how to stand and walk, and what the thing, what areas of the stage are called, and all of that kind of stuff, and understanding the technical aspects of lighting and sound design. So yes, it makes a big difference, even if you're, say, a part-time performer that does some things for friends. If you understand all of that, you can always use the way that you arrange things to create a sense of purpose. So you can always set people up in a way where you've created a stage or a mood, or anything like that. And a lot of this isn't necessarily talked about in theatrical terms, but if you read the Jerks blog, if you're a magician out there and you look up the Jerks blog, he does talk about that social magic and creating this feeling through a dramatic expression of it. So far, he hasn't talked about stagecraft, putting people, arranging people or setting things up. Although some of his latest things, he's gotten into, where you delay setting something up properly so that that people are going to be receptive to it. One of the best ones was about the eclipse, and how he wasn't sure how he was going to present something that related to the eclipse. So he decided that he was going to test the waters, and then found out that just by that little test that he could get enough attention and then hold on to that so that there was an anticipation before he actually performed the thing. And that allowed him then to remember, yeah, I told you I was going to try this thing. So all of that was a dramatic construct. And because of that, it played exceptionally well. So it was all about staging.
I think most people who get into magic have that one magician who they saw that really made an impact on them. Was there any particular magician for you, or magicians, that really resonated with you the most?
Early on, I didn't remember all the names of all of the magicians. I really didn't know, one from another or remember all of them. I wish I did. I wish I could remember all of the names of the people that were touring. I will say that there was one magician who toured with his wife at that time, and they performed a beautiful Miser's Dream to music that was like a behind the scenes kind of a thing. So he had the bucket and would apparently pluck coins out of the air, but there was nothing there. So he would act like he was producing a coin and tossing it into this bucket, and you would hear it land in there. And as he's doing that, like he gets to the third one, his wife walks out from behind the set, and she has a bucket and coins in her hand, and she's actually providing the sound for him each time he's doing it. So you see, so you thought to yourself, oh, that's kind of cool. He's actually producing these invisible coins and all that kind of stuff. Then you see her, and you're like, you got me, you fooled me. They continue a little bit, and then at the end, they both shake the bucket, so you hear her coins rattling, and then she turns her bucket over, and it's empty. And then he dumps the coins out of his bucket. So it's a really, really nice twist. So that resonated with me for some reason, because I love the idea of being able to let the audience in on a little bit of a secret, and then play with that, have some fun with that. And they did it in such a way, they did it in such a beautiful, artistic, gentle way that you didn't feel like you had been made a fool of. You thought it was really magic. It felt like the coins went from one place to another, not like they were tricking you. It felt like it was real. So I don't remember their name, but that influenced me because I really, to this day, I still love transposition effects more than anything else in the entire world. I've joked with Sarah Ella that 5 out of my 9 tricks that I do in my show are things that go from here to over there. And I should just rename my show. This is the show where things go from this side of the stage to that side of the stage. But the audience would never know that. They all look different. They all feel different, which is really nice. But I love transposition effects because it just does something for the audience, And then beyond that, there were many magicians that I saw on TV. We were really fortunate at that time that I was growing up that there was the series called The Magician, which the star of that was Bill Bixby. So I am telling you how old I am, but I was just a little kid when that was happening. For those of you that don't remember that series, it was great. It had great consultants on it and great magic. It was all about a guy who was basically a crime fighter, but he was also a magician, and he had this awesome car that he would drive around, and he lived in the magic castle and all this kind of stuff. So in addition to that, Bill Bixby then got a job hosting a show that was like live from the Magic Castle. And so he would introduce these acts, and then you would see performances of them from the Magic Castle. So the Magic Castle influenced me at that time because I got to see all of these great acts. So what they had actually done was they made a deal to sell this footage to TV, and Bill Bixby was never actually there. He would just do a quick intro in hosting the thing, and then they would show this footage from the Magic Castle. So it was actually pretty cool when I finally understood development of television shows and stuff like that, because I like everyone that watched it thought he was actually at the Magic Castle, and these were the acts for that particular night. But no, it was all manufactured. Again, a beautiful fiction that has the truth in it. So I loved those acts. And again, I don't remember really any of them, although I believe I'm trying to remember. I believe I saw Peter Pitt doing the dancing cane, because it was the best dancing cane I'd ever seen. So I remember the dancing cane from that. So that influenced me greatly. So I believe it had to have been Peter Pitt. Also at the time, Johnny Carson the Tonight Show was on, hosted by Johnny Carson, and Johnny was an avid amateur magician, and so he had more magicians on than any other talk show host ever has or ever did before. And so I saw a ton of magic on there, and one of my favorite performers on that was Orson Welles. And Orson Welles was not a professional magician, but if you're at all, a cinemaphile, you know who Orson Welles was. Orson Welles directed Citizen Kane, one of the finest films ever made, but he was also extremely difficult to work with because he just didn't go along with what Hollywood wanted. He was far too concerned with every detail of the final product. He was so meticulous and so artistic and so demanding about absolutely everything that had he been able to give a little bit, he probably would have had more. I mean, it's amazing to say, but more success and that kind of stuff. He didn't. His catalog of films wasn't nearly as big as it would have been without him. But one of the other things that he did, of course, was the radio broadcast War of the Worlds, which caused people to believe that the Earth was being invaded by aliens. He was that convincing in his acting. So anyway, so he appeared on the Tonight Show, and one of the things that he liked to do, he was there being interviewed as a Hollywood celebrity, but one of the things that he'd like to do was every once in a while he would like to perform a magic trick. And whenever Orson performed magic, you were in for a treat. He did some really impressive stuff, and it was so strong and so unbelievable. One of my favorites, and it was a Jim Steinmeier effect, was that Orson was smoking a cigar. Now, in those days, it was okay to smoke on TV, and so he was smoking a cigar, and he asked for a $100 bill from Johnny Carson, took the $100 bill, had Johnny sign it, and then he put it in an envelope and burnt it with the cigar to ashes, and it was gone. And then he just sat there with the cigar, smoking it. And Johnny was like, "Well, is that it?" And Orson says, "Yeah, that's the trick. It's the vanishing $100 bill trick." Right? So Johnny's like, "Oh my God, I can't believe that you did that to me." And he's like, "Yeah, what'd you expect?" So then they talked for a little while, and then just before he was going to leave, he goes, "You know what? I feel like that trick was unfinished." So he takes the cigar he's been smoking the whole time, he breaks it open, and in the middle of it is a folded $100 bill. Johnny takes it out himself. It's got his signature on it. Oh my God, it was masterful. It was so beautiful.
Wow. And you connect that with that iconic Orson Welles voice, and that just makes it all the more magical.
Yes. Yeah. And as you can, I'm not using it because I'm being on a microphone here. I'm being recorded, but I have that super strong, trained stage voice. So yeah, I won't do it here because I'll blow everybody's ears out. But I don't need amplification in most theaters, just like he didn't. It's just you get down in that register and project. But I'm gonna keep it. I'm gonna keep it as quiet as I can.
Yeah, it's funny. I tend to be the same way because I had a great drama coach in high school who taught me how to project. And it's funny, ever since high school, I've never really been able to turn it off. It's like so many times I'll be talking and then in the middle of my conversation, my wife will say, "You are being so loud. Turn it down."
So loud. Yeah, so loud. It's taken me many years just to be able to have a conversation in public without attracting everybody's attention.
Yeah. There are times where I would be whispering a secret to somebody, and the guy across the table will be like, "I heard everything you just said."
Yeah, yeah.
One thing that I like to bring up, because this is improv and magic, is the art of character in performance. And one thing I like to ask improvisers and magicians is the idea that when you play someone on stage, you are you and not you at the same time, but it always varies on how much of you is in every single performance. So I'm interested in asking you, Dan, how much of Dan do we typically see when you perform?
Yeah, and that's a really, really great question because everybody has to make their choices. So it can be answered differently for everyone, and the percentages are going to be all different. And there isn't a correct answer as to what those percentages should be. So I'll start with me, but then I think we should talk more about that so that the people listening understand that what I'm saying works for me, and it wouldn't necessarily work for everyone. So, so on stage, you get maybe 70 to 80% me. And that's just because I like to be really open about who I am, and I'm generally a pretty friendly kind of person, and what it comes down to is that if you can accentuate the aspects of yourself, accentuate the positive about yourself, and it doesn't have to be positive, but the aspects about yourself that help your character on stage. So, what are the parts of you that are intrinsically you that help your character on stage, that move forward, that the audience will understand, work for you, and then just suppress all of the things that don't matter to your character or would detract in some way from your character. For example, if I'm actually tired, I don't bring that to the stage. My character is not tired. If I'm in a bad mood, that doesn't come to the stage. My character is not in a bad mood. So that it's important that what happens off stage doesn't affect me on stage. So that that 20% that doesn't make it to the stage. Whatever happens to be going on. And I have faults and failings and all of those kinds of things that have nothing whatsoever to do with my character on stage. So the other thing is what part is manufactured for the stage. I think that's important too. So they're getting a lot of who I am for real, but that's definitely not enough for me to be a magical character. So I have to manufacture things. So that's what I do is I make up that other 20 to 30% by what's manufactured for the character. So things that aren't real about me, that are real about the character. So my particular character on stage, I've just chosen that my character on stage is actually a magician. I keep it close to home. I keep it close to who I am, but I also choose that I am truly a magician. I have this magical ability. But what it is, the ability that I have is something that I only barely understand. And because I only barely understand it, I don't push the limits of it. I don't like to try to do anything that might be, dangerous to other people or might injure other people or might be too much. So I take care of mundane things through magic. I turn the mundane into the miraculous. That's actually one of my catchphrases. And so when it comes to what I feel comfortable using my magic for, that's where I feel comfortable. And what's nice about that is if someone from my audience asks me to do something in particular, I can say in character, "Oh, I could, but I don't feel comfortable with that. I don't know what might happen." Somebody says, can you fly? Can you do like? I'm like, yeah, I can, and I've tried it a little bit, but it's extremely scary. I don't feel comfortable doing it. It's hard to control. It's better if I don't. So that is more believable than saying no to someone. I have a reason why I won't test those limits, So because I once had, and it occurred to me, actually, the first time it occurred to me was way back when I was doing kids shows, 30, 40 years ago. One of the kids said, "Can you make a dragon appear right here? If you're such a great magician, make a dragon appear right here." And I didn't have a response for it because I hadn't developed my character at that point. I was just doing kids shows, and that came out of left field, came out of nowhere. And I was trying to think, and I just said, "Well, no, that's just not something I do." And he goes, "You're a fake." Right? Like, oh my God, that hurts so much.
Especially from a kid, that is life shattering.
No, right. Yeah, of course. Well, but it hurt, it stung. And so I turned to him and I go, "Yeah, What'd you expect? Right? I didn't have an answer. So I I thought about that. I was like, wait a second. What if I was real and somebody asked me to produce a dragon and then I produced a dragon and it killed everybody? That would be bad. I don't think that's a successful kid show. I got to get paid in advance, and now I got to clean up a dragon, and I got to explain this. So that's where my thought process came from.
And you're probably also going to need a good insurance policy too.
Yeah, exactly. So think about it. From that point on, any exchange where somebody put me to the test, I was ready. Because I was a real magician. So I could always say, well, yeah, I could, but it's not a good idea. Here's why. It's not, you may have, but, and I wish that something like that would have happened again in those kids shows. It didn't. It's just this one kid. That was his thing. But man, I wish I would have been ready when he said that. Because think about how much different the perception is. If a kid goes, if you're a real magician, can you just make a dragon appear here? And then you go, okay, stand back. Oh, you know what? Wait a second. If I do that, that dragon's going to attack everybody. It's probably going to blow fire all over you and everybody else here. And I'd love to be able to do it, but I'm not going to do it here. You're going to have to ask me some other place where it's safe. That's it. Get it? It's like, that's real. Okay? That's the way a real magician would deal with that situation. And then the kid would not go, oh, you're a fake, The kid would go, huh? You could really do it? And you go, yeah, but dragons are dangerous. And now you have a conversation. Now there's something real, and you can talk about it. And you can say, and the other thing is, everybody would be so scared. Everybody would freak out. You don't want me to actually freak everybody out. And now, of course, kids will say, well, yeah, I do. I still want you to do it or whatever. But you converse with them, and you say, really think about it. Think about if I do it and it takes so much energy, I won't be able to do anything else, and I'll sit there and that kind of stuff. But I'll do it for you some other time. That works, right? And then if they don't like that, you say, well, okay, look, I'll tell you a story. I did this once. I did make a dragon appear once. Maybe you've heard about this dragon that was a fire-breathing dragon and destroyed all the towns in England and stuff like that. My name used to be Merlin. And if they don't recognize it, you say, go ahead and look it up. Right? That kind of thing. So you can play in character with them. Now, of course, I never like to take anything, quite that far. But if you had to, you can. You can, because your character now allows that. So one of the things, let's get back to a little bit more back to reality. One of the things that my magician character has that I don't personally have is that I believe in the rule that if I speak it, it will be. It is created as it's spoken, is one of the things that happens for my character. So in a couple of places in my show, I'm doing something and I say something and then it just happens. So and my favorite moment of that is when I borrow somebody's ring from them in the show, and I'm looking at the ring and I say, well, that looks great and really expensive. And I'm surprised you trust me, given what you've seen here. I usually do this with a quarter, but I thought it might be more exciting with a ring. And then I say, here, hold on to that. And when I hand it back to them, it's a quarter. There's nothing else in my hands. And they look at it and I go, so we're going to do the trick with the quarter. And I just go on, right? and then I say, oh, you didn't want to do it with a quarter? Oh, I'm sorry. I probably shouldn't have said that. It's good with a quarter. If you want to do it with a ring, do you have another one? That kind of thing. Yeah. So now we've created that situation, but it's not done as though it's a magic trick. It's done because I'm just having a conversation with them, and then it just happens. Now you can't get away with that for everything. You have to establish that there's some control in what you're doing, and there's some planning in what you're doing. But in that particular routine, it seems like that moment is unplanned, and then I just have to go with it. Okay, so that's me on stage. It's 70, let's just call it 75% Dan Harlan and 25% magician. For everybody else, it's going to be different, and your character may actually be immersive. There are some beautiful immersive characters, so like Piff the Magic Dragon.
Absolutely.
There's a great character. Mac King is a great character. So in Piff the Magic Dragon, I'm guessing here, I don't know if you've had him on to ask him the question, I'm guessing that his real personality it's probably in there 20 to 30%. He probably is kind of deadpan in general and that kind of stuff. But obviously there's a huge reliance on the costuming for the character and a huge reliance on maintaining that kind of that the deadpan sort of negative character, because it's extra funny that way. So his is immersive in the fact that it's obviously a costumed character. But when you go with somebody like Matt King, people aren't sure. And one of the reasons they're not sure is because I would say Matt King is about 50-50 on stage. He plays up the Kentucky aspect, so that's legit. But obviously he doesn't walk around dressed like that. He doesn't talk with that much of an accent. And generally speaking, he's not, performing magic in the same way. And he doesn't have the same inflection in his voice when he's off stage. So there's no definite answer for any of it. But for me, because I don't really perform in what people would think of as a character, I've actually chosen something that I think is it's subtle. It's got an elegance to it in that people think it's just me. When people see me on stage, they think it's just me. When they see me off stage, I haven't changed that much when I talk to my audience, and I still can do magic just by saying things. So I'm pretty much a magician for real. I just happen to be relatable and friendly.
With everything that you just described, do you think that there's maybe a lot less of that now because we are in the internet social media age where you see so many magicians who they just go on TikTok or Instagram and it's just a quick 5-second trick and that's it. They don't do any sort of interaction.
I see absolutely nothing wrong with that, but those people won't work the venues that I work. And I see nothing wrong with that either. If they want to work the venues that I work, they can't with that material. You can't just do 30-second trick after trick and do a 45-minute show. It's just not going to work. So, but there is a great benefit to that. What it comes down to is that social media, TikTok, Facebook, all of the other things like that, they're a different venue. And that's why there's nothing wrong with it. It's a wonderful different venue too. So I wouldn't say that anybody has to learn to do what I do. They should feel comfortable doing whatever they feel comfortable with and find the venue that works for them. So some of the things that I used to do, I don't do anymore because they don't fit. Like I can't do a lot of the kids show stuff that I did years ago. Some people perform kids shows. That's their bread and butter, and they do that for their entire life. And that's great. Nothing wrong with that. Some people perform on social media, and that's their bread and butter, and that's great too. Some people perform exclusively on television. That's great for them as well. So, I actually don't think that the audiences, at least the audiences that I've run into, I don't think that they believe that a magician is just a person who performs a quick trick. I don't think they believe it. They see magicians do that and they're like, oh, that's good magic, right? Oh, I was surprised. I was surprised by that. I think that they have a pretty well rounded idea of a magician. One thing that's nice about that abundance of exposure to magic and magicians of various types is that I think we are past the stereotypical magician phase. I don't think that audiences believe that a magician wears a tuxedo and a top hat and pulls a rabbit out of it. Uh, I'm pretty sure, and I definitely know that in the new, the youngest generation, anybody under 20 years old um, thinks of a magician in a completely different way, and in a better way, I think, because it's more diverse. So, although that may not have directly answered the question, it is my feelings about it that it's all good. There's room for everyone. And, one of my favorite magicians that I got to be really good friends with, Eugene Berger, would say, "Magic is a house with many rooms."
That's one of my favorite
Yeah.
quotes too.
Yes.
You are known for being very inventive and very creative in the magic that you do. And so I'm curious, what is your process in creating your unique magic tricks? What is your process? Where do the ideas come from? And how do you get it from paper to execution?
Yes. So this is always the challenge for any artist to describe and codify their process, uh, because it is typically varied, multifaceted, and nonlinear. And it's it's definitely the same thing for me. So it's kind of a challenge for me to do it. Although I have taken some time to think about my process and think about what parts of it might be valuable to other people in figuring out their own ideas. So number one, I like to collect information from anywhere that interests me. So that's an important thing, is to look outside of magic. If magic is your one and only passion and interest, you are not going to be as creative. You may come up with moves, variations, methods, those kinds of things, but it is not going to be the kind of stuff that makes a huge difference. Um, it'll make differences behind the scenes, and maybe people will like your particular handling better. But again, it's not as creative as I think you can be. If you look outside magic, if you find other interests, if you like other things in particular, uh, try to find a way to apply that to what you're doing. So for me, obviously, I started in theater, so I really like theater. I like all kinds of performance. So any movie, any TV, any series, any streaming, anything like that, anything that has this depth of character and script and interest and stuff to it, I'm really, really fascinated by that. Music influences me greatly, so I pick some really interesting musical pieces for my show. I just love that. The visual arts are fascinating for me because I started out that way, and so I'm always thinking about the design for what goes on behind me, and the way my props look, and the way that they're set, and the lighting of the theaters, and all of that kind of stuff. And I'm an avid math fan for recreational mathematics. I absolutely love recreational mathematics. Now, I've probably lost everybody just by saying mathematics. we won't talk about it too much, except to say that it has helped me to create some of the most surprising things that are uniquely mine, that are signature pieces, because I've read a lot of recreational mathematic books, and I've studied a lot about mathematics, and then I've applied these principles that remain completely hidden to the work that I do that becomes completely visual. So a lot of the mathematics that I study is geometry or topology. These are more physical manifestations of mathematics, and it's really fascinating, only if you love it. So that's an area that I really like. I'm also a chef, so I love cooking. So cooking gets involved. A lot of my magic involves grocery items. For that reason, I am fascinated by groceries. I also love to build things. So there's a lot of stuff that's influenced by hardware and construction and other things like that that are in my act. So that's step number one, is to allow the things that you love from any other place to affect you, to become magical. Now, the other couple of things that you can do now is what I call the substitution solution. So if you look at magic that you like, that you enjoy performing, and you think about the physical props and then classify them in a generic kind of a way, you can now make substitutions for them that could be unique for you. So let's say that you're working on a coin trick, and instead of thinking of it as coins, you classify it as metal discs, or solid, inflexible discs. They don't even have to be metal, depending on what you're working toward. So obviously there are many substitutions. You could use poker chips, you could use washers, you can use tokens, you can use all kinds of things to substitute for the coins. And maybe there's something that you'll come up with that is a better solution than what anybody else is doing. You want to make sure that when you're substituting that, it comes from some other area of interest for you, so it has some meaning to you. So what I suggest is, if you're working on a coin trick, you get a blank sheet of paper and you write down every disc type object you can think of. And it doesn't matter what size it is, too, because you can always change the size. You can always talk about things in other ways. Now, I go beyond that because I also look at what coins have on them. So they have people's faces. So sometimes I will make it about people. Other people have obviously performed magic when they talk about the eagle that's on there. The eagle has the ability to fly. So it's not a new idea, but it's a new idea to really focus on writing absolutely everything down that you can and finding something that resonates with you. So now you have a choice. You can either physically, truly substitute a new object for the thing that you're working with, which I think is a great solution. I think it's the best way to do it. Or you can do it just by reference. You can say something about the object that references something else. An example from my work is the horror matrix, where I talk about horror movies. And I mentioned that horror movies, or movies in general, that influence what I do. So my coin assembly is about 4 teenagers that go camping in the woods. And so when I put them out there, I put the coins out, and that's my opening line. 4 teenagers went camping in the woods. And then I bring out the cards, and I say they each had their own tent. So I'm not overtly saying these are the teenagers and these are the tents. I think that is, that's trite to say these coins represent teenagers and these cards represent tents. Don't do that. You just have to say it, and the script carries it along.
The audience will figure it out.
The audience is smart enough to figure it out. It's not a big cognitive leap to do that. So that's an option right there. That's a way of substituting. And that works for any object. It doesn't matter what the object is. You do something with dice, think about cube-shaped things. You do something with cards, rectangular, flexible, pieces of whatever and also in the effect, you have to think about how you're using the object. So, for example, if cards is one of the best ones, because are you just using them as physically as rectangles? In that case, the tent analogy there, you're using them to cover something, and you've got to give them a little bridge anyway. So now I'm completely justified in squeezing these little things and laying them on top of the coins. Much more justified than any other matrix I've ever seen, just by calling them tents. There's a tent here and a tent and a tent and a tent, and they're done. And they are now tents. So if I were using them as cards for the faces, though, maybe I'm using the numbers, then you have to think about some way to incorporate the justification of the numbers. And one of a trick that I do with cards, I've done every trick in the book in Tarbell. So one that I did was about breaking somebody's PIN code. And so using the cards for the numbers for that was one of the ideas. Maybe you use them for finding somebody's card. Well, you have to think about, where else in the world do we find things? How do we find things? Why do we find things? What are things that are lost? All of that kind of stuff. So I've started to go into the other territory now, because the other territory that will make you creative is, what is your script? What is your premise? How can you write something presentationally that is so much better than merely describing the actions that you're doing? Because most magic fails by becoming a description of stuff the audience can already see. If your magic is just saying what the audience can already see, then you are using patter. And patter is meaningless chatter. The meaningless is unnecessary. It's annoying. You're better off just not saying anything. Play some music, shut up, work TikTok, do whatever you can. Don't tell me. I have 4 coins and I'm going to place them in a square. I have 4 cards and I'll put a card on each one of the I can see that. I am not an idiot, so that's a problem, right? So instead, the next thing to be creative is to figure out why. Why are you doing that? And if you thought about that substitution solution, then that gives you kind of a way of moving your magic into something more meaningful, something that resonates, something that has something about a human experience, what we talked about earlier, something that's theatrical, something that now has a script. And a script is so much better than patter. Patter's meaningless. A script is meaningful. And I would much rather if magicians start referring to the words they use as a script. Have some respect for yourself, your words, and your audience, and start writing things that matter. That's it.
So when I was 16 years old, I got to go to my first ever IBM convention in Miami Beach, and I absolutely loved it. It was a whole weekend, and I frequented the dealers area where they have different booths, and I bought a whole bunch of tricks and racked up my mom's credit card, which made her very angry.
Mm-hmm.
But I remember one trick in particular that I bought, which I absolutely loved and couldn't get enough of, was a trick called Card-Toon. Mm-hmm. And this, of course,
I've heard of it.
This is a trick that you, of course, invented. And it's a trick that still holds up to this very day. It's a timeless trick that involves a stick figure pulling out a selected card. I'm curious, what was your process in creating that particular trick, and where did that idea come from for you?
Sure. So as I mentioned, I was a graphic designer. So obviously I was interested in anything that had a graphic picture nature to it. And one of the things I didn't mention, which is related to movies and TV and all that kind of stuff, is animation. I'm a big fan of animation. So I happened to be on tour way back in 1991, and I was on a long drive back from Boston to the Detroit area. So a long drive after doing a gig in Boston. So it was an overnight drive. I had to keep myself awake because I had to be at work the very next morning. So I was going to drive all night long. I was going to go to sleep for about 3 hours, and then I was going to go to work, something like that. And so on the way home, to keep myself awake, I was just jotting things down, dangerously driving with one hand, but writing things down on a notepad in the passenger seat. There was nobody else out on the road, so it wasn't that bad. And I could write mostly without looking. So I was just writing things down that struck me as magical. Like they had an inherent magical characteristic to them. And I'll mention a couple of them. One of them was electricity. We take it for granted, but it has this inherent magical quality to it. People do understand it to a great extent. So, there you go. But I wrote it down, electricity. Another one was flight, being able to, hop on an airplane and fly. And it's really impressive, and especially because that hasn't been around that long. Electricity and flight haven't been around that long. Well, I mean, they haven't been available to us to use them in this way. So yeah, magical quality, right? And then another one was magnetism, and I wrote that down. And you could throw fire in there, even though everybody completely takes that for granted. It's still got a magical quality to it, and we still use it. We still put it on birthday cakes to blow out the candles, make a wish. There's magic tied up in that. It's great. So these are the kinds of ideas I was writing down. And one of them that I just jotted down was animation. It's got a magical quality to it because if you know anything about it, and people do, these still images, these individual drawings become animated. Now, in the modern world, there are alternatives to that form of hand-drawn animation that take a little bit of the charm out of it from time to time, but the concept is still pretty strong because I would still argue that they're individual images because that is how all of our video is delivered. They're all still frames, every single one of them. So even just writing down, internet video or streaming video, the internet is magical. And that didn't, and for the common folk, that wasn't even something I could write down in 1991, So animation made it on the list, and I kept writing a little bit, but I just kept thinking about it because, again, I was a graphic designer. I was like, you know what? I like that animation thing. I haven't done anything with animation, and I'm an artist. I could draw it. I could draw something. What can I draw? So I just kept running it through my head, and eventually I came up with the whole idea of changing the last frame of animation in order to affect the entire thing. So we're getting a little close to method here, but that's an important step. For me, is to figure out, I can do something that nobody will know about, that is subtle, that makes a huge difference. Well, that's the whole idea of magic methods. I can do something nobody knows about, that's subtle, that makes a huge difference. If you ever want to develop a method, think about that phrase, run that one past. So that's what I did. I came up with that method, and then I couldn't think about anything else. I got home shortly after that, and instead of going to sleep, I grabbed a deck of cards and I started drawing. I started drawing, and I drew all of this stuff, and I made it work, and it worked great. I quickly took a shower, threw on my work clothes, and I went to work. And I was dead tired the whole day, but it didn't matter because the only thing that was on my mind, I wouldn't have gotten any work done anyway. The only thing that was on my mind was that particular trick with that animation, and I needed to get back home and work on it and finish it again. So I knew it was something special. I didn't realize how big a deal it was, but it was something that really resonated with me that I fell in love with right away.
Well, I'm excited to ask you about Card-Toon because, like I said, it's a very timeless trick. And the other cool thing is it has a new second life because you performed this on Penn and Teller Fool Us. Mm-hmm. And, of course, I immediately recognized it, and I recognized you, and all of us magicians were like, oh, we love this trick. We recognize it. And, of course, we know how it's done. But then, at the very end, you, Dan Harlan, pull a fast one, and you show us that all the cards have nothing else on it but the animation. And I loved watching Penn Jillette's reaction. He just turned into a 13-year-old boy. I remember watching him hold the cards and be like, wow, wow. Do you remember that whole experience of being on Fool Us and having that reaction at the end?
Yes. I will say it was a great experience. Absolutely great. The entire staff that works on that show are fabulous. They do a beautiful job. They take care of all of the artists that appear on there. They take really good care of everybody. They make the experience as stress-free and as easy and as fun as possible for everyone. Having said that, I was actually set up for a challenge because the producers wanted me to perform Card-Toon, and I knew that Penn and Teller knew how it was done. And I had said to the producers, they know how this is done, so it just doesn't seem fair that I'm going to go onto the show and show them something they know how it's done, because the purpose is for me to try to fool them, and I know that I won't fool them with this thing. I'd rather do something else, but the producers wouldn't hear of it. They wanted me to do Card-Toon. So I thought to myself, well, okay, I've got some options here. I could just perform Card-Toon and not try to fool them. But the problem is that it goes beyond Penn and Teller, in that if I just did Card-Toon, every person in the audience, the viewing audience especially, could look this trick up and know exactly how it was done. And just about, I don't know, 2 months before they booked me for this, Jamie Raven had performed it on Britain's Got Talent. And as a side note, Card-Toon is the trick that changed Simon Cowell's mind about magic. It's the trick that made him like magic, which I think is a pretty big deal. So if you go back, you can actually look it up on YouTube. Jamie Raven on Britain's Got Talent made Simon love magic using my trick. But the problem with that was that he did it in the standard way, and the entire British press had just went ahead and exposed that you could go to any magic shop and buy this trick that he had used to impress Simon Cowell, which is it's the modern way. It's what people do. That's fine. So I could just do that, but then it would be exposed. But again, in America, and I said, well, the other option that I have is to try to figure out how to do it and fool them. And that's a much more challenging proposition. And so I liked that one a lot better. So I came up with about a half a dozen methods, and about 3 of them are good, and one of them is the one that I chose. It took a lot of effort. I had to draw from scratch many, many, many drawings to make it look like the original. What I used on Penn and Teller was entirely hand-drawn, every bit of it. But it was hand-drawn to look exactly like the original. And then I had to design some apparatus that automated some things, and that cost a bit of money and time and effort. And then I had to figure out how to make that little trick play for about 7 minutes. And so I added some red herrings and some other stuff in there. And if Penn and Teller ever hear this, and I hope they do, I just want to apologize, because the only other thing that I knew I was going to have to do was to delay the reveal, which doesn't seem fair. It's not fair. Okay. And I will say that it's not fair at all. They thought, because of what I was doing, that I was doing the original trick. And then they thanked me for it and all that kind of stuff. And then I showed them that everything was normal. I had to, because if I had done the trick and then showed them that everything was normal, they would have figured out what I did. See? So I delayed the reveal until after they guessed. And I felt only good about that because I was put in a tough spot, and the reveal isn't part of the trick. So if I fooled them with the trick and then I reveal that it's not the trick, I kind of am okay with that. But honestly, I only did that because of the circumstances that I was in. Otherwise, I think that that's a little underhanded. And if they hear this, or if they see me, I will make sure I apologize to them. I haven't caught up with either of them since then. But yeah, it worked out great. And I'm thrilled by the results, obviously, mostly because it made the public think about magic. On every place that it appeared on YouTube, because it appears on the Fool Us feed, and then everybody else picks it up, and it's got tons and tons of views. I don't keep track of views, but every place that it appeared, there'd be comment after comment after comment about, like, I know the original, but I have no idea how this is done. And then there'd be guesses and guesses and guesses, and that's great. I love that conversation. It's fun. It was more interesting for everybody at home than if I had just gone on and done the trick.
Where do you keep the Fool Us trophy?
Just in the other room. I could. It's behind that wall right there. I could grab it, but no, we don't need to pull it.
We know it's there. We know it's there.
We know it's there. Yeah.
You've had the opportunity to collaborate and work with other great magicians. You mentioned Jeff McBride. You've also worked with David Copperfield and Kevin James and Keith Barry. What is that like for you to collaborate with these well-known superstars of magic?
Yeah, I love it. And in fact, I can't mention who it is, but I have another collaboration coming up very, very soon. I'm not at liberty to discuss who it is, but it's always exciting for me. And maybe I can just use Keith Barry as an example, because he's among the list of people there. People may not realize this, but Keith, I think, has the best mind for magic out of everybody that was named there, and everybody there is a heavy hitter. But Keith came from the world of being a magician and learning and doing sleight of hand and doing every kind of party and all of that kind of stuff, and then transitioned into mentalism, but still had a background, a foundation in physical magic and that. So he had a good cross-discipline understanding of everything. He also did some dangerous stunts early on in his career, which was awesome. He really covered all the bases. But what I liked about working with him was that he came in with a clear kind of an idea for what he wanted, but he also said, bring anything that you want to the table, any ideas that you want. He had a few ideas and all kinds of stuff, and he said, bring whatever your ideas are, and they can be absolutely anything. So I actually showed up, and I had a notebook filled with ideas. I had maybe over 100 of things that I thought would be perfect, because this was actually this was my first television consulting. I'm just double checking. It was actually the second time I worked with Keith, because he approached me first to purchase the rights to perform one of my tricks. He did that for a spring break special on MTV, and then asked me to join in on this television special of his. The other guys I did for their live shows. So it was my first TV thing, and I was like, I've got all of these ideas that can kind of only be done on TV, and then a bunch of other stuff that I think is just really great, and some huge concept stuff. So I brought all this stuff in, but he had about a dozen consultants in this first meeting, and I remember it. And he opens the meeting, he talks about the special, and then he says, does anybody want to tell me some of the ideas that they've brought? And nobody spoke up, so I was like, well, I'll start, I'll tell you some. And so I turn the page, and I start rattling off some of these ideas, and I'm looking around at the faces of the other people, and I won't say who they are, because they were all shocked at how unbelievable these were. Because this is a pitch meeting, so I don't have to tell them how they're done. Mm-hmm. Right? And these are other magicians, and I'm telling them what can be done. Right? I'm saying, this is going to happen, and this is going to happen, that's going to happen. Right? And they're like, huh? That's not going to happen. There's no way you can do that. You can't do that, right? That's what they're all thinking. They're all shaking their heads, right? And I'm ready to turn to the next page. And Keith says, and he's writing all of these down on the whiteboard. And then I turn to the next page, and he says, hold on just a second. Does anybody else want to jump in, right? And then a person would jump in, and they'd have like one or two ideas, and they were kind of variations on standard stuff, right? And he'd go, okay, great. Anybody else? And then I said, well, I'll give you some more. And I gave some more. They all get on the whiteboard, right? It goes on back and forth like that. Every time I'm saying something, absolutely impossible. You can't possibly do it. And he's writing it on the board. And the other ones are like, yeah, okay, we could probably give that a go. We could work with that or whatever, right? So about halfway through this, one of the people that's there, and again, I won't say who it is, they speak up and they go, Harlan's saying a bunch of stuff that, sure, I just don't think it's going to happen, right? And then the producers are in the room, right? The producers of the thing, and they're like, yeah, there's no way. Like that thing that he said about this, I could give you the example. Here was the thing. He wanted to do some stuff in the winter. This never made it into the show, but it was a great one. So I wanted to have ice sculptors come in and build a big ice block wall. And then Keith would be on one side of the wall, and he would be pushed through the wall, right? And end up on the other side. Oh, so he would do a watch steal. This is the thing that made it fun for me. He would do a watch steal of the person that whoever he was appearing with, and then show that he was now wearing their watch, right? And then he would be pushed through the wall And on the other side of the wall, he doesn't have the watch on, and it's frozen in a block of ice in the middle of the wall.
I love that.
It's still a great trick, right? So that's one of the. They're going, okay, yeah, fine, but there's no practical way of doing that, right? And the producers go, yeah, that's not going to happen. And Keith, to his credit, said, if Harlan says he can do it, he can do it. So then I said, look, I'll come back tomorrow. I'll show you the prototype. So we leave the meeting. We shut the whole thing down. That night, I build the prototype. I bring it in the next day. I show them how it works. They never said another thing that I couldn't do. They said, that's the most wildest, coolest thing we've ever seen. Because I can reveal it because we never did it. I can't tell you exactly how it's done, but the whole idea is this built in to a completely clear ice wall built of these giant blocks. I had done all of the research on this, on how they make the giant blocks of ice, all this kind of stuff, on and on throughout the whole thing. But built into it in a way that you couldn't tell was a mechanical way of shifting the blocks that was automatic with one single plunge done, that would also allow the watch to remain there, and then using a thing that many people are familiar with that they didn't even think of for getting him through the wall. And that's as far as I can go. I'm dancing around it.
Right.
Okay. But now let me get to the ending. I bring the prototype in. I show them. Everybody agrees it can be done. The producers all agree. After that meeting, Keith pulled me aside and he said, I'm going to fire everybody else. And he did.
Oh, wow.
He fired everybody else. There was no need for anybody else. Every single one of them. So I was lead consultant on it. And I said to him, look, fire everybody else except this one guy. I mentioned one guy that I knew we wanted to have on for all the mentalism stuff. And that was it. I consult on his first American special. Any of the original magic was all stuff that Keith and I put together. And sometimes he would come with the idea and I'd figure out how to do it or change it, to improve it or whatever. Sometimes I'd come with the idea and we'd explore that. And I got to tell you, one of my favorite ones out of that was early on in the days of Rubik's Cube. He and I were the first ones, actually I should say this, to come up with a practical way of giving someone a Rubik's Cube so that they could mix it while you mix another one, and then showing that they match. And there were no overt gimmicks. The two cubes at the end, completely ungimmicked, and they match exactly. And I was actually the first one to come up with a method of doing that. It could be done completely practical, surrounded under any circumstances. Yeah, we had a lot of fun with that. He did that one on the special, and then took that on a few talk shows and did it on talk shows, and it went over really well. But that was early on in Rubik's Cube magic. So it's just that. I absolutely love it. And in fact, when I consult for someone, I tell them up front, there is nothing you can propose that I can't figure out how to do. I can figure out how to do absolutely anything with constraints. There will always be constraints, but if you give me an idea, I will figure out how you can do it under these circumstances and those circumstances. I'll have at least 3 ways of doing it, but there will be constraints. So you have to decide what the trade-offs are, but the end result will give the audience exactly what it is that you are proposing they should experience. It will give them that experience. And there's nothing that can't be done, no matter what it is. I haven't run up against anything at all that's beyond possibility. Yeah.
Do you get starstruck at all when you consult with these well-known people, or are you just kind of like, oh, these are my friends. These are the people I get to work with?
Yeah, no, I'm not starstruck by people at all. I never really was, and it was mostly because again, I grew up in theater, and I know people are people off stage. That I am always very, very happy to be surrounded by creative and interesting people, but I'm not starstruck. It gets my creative juices flowing, and I like the energy of creative people. So, I collaborate well with others. Yeah, I just don't, I don't see any reason to get like starstruck by anyone else who's doing great work, because I think we all strive to do great work. I'm more complimentary, than anything else. I'm neither starstruck nor jealous. I have this mad respect for them.
Well, Dan, I have mad respect for you.
Oh, thanks.
And here's my last question for you, my friend. And this can apply to anything you want to apply it to, just FYI.
Mm-hmm.
What's the one piece of advice that has served you well that you'd want everyone else to hear?
Well, after you do everything that you can to make sure that what you're going to perform for people is as good as it can possibly be, there's one last hurdle, and that is the nervousness that's natural when you're going to perform. So I was given some advice in theater that I think is very important, and that is that when you feel that nervousness, you have to recognize that it's an anticipation, that it is an excitement, an energy, and that means that you are concerned about what you're going to do. And the way it's phrased up in a very simple way is that it's okay to have butterflies in your stomach as long as you get them to fly in a formation. So when you feel that, the butterflies in the stomach, think about how organized and set and ready everything is. Get those butterflies prepared to deliver what you've already put together for people. And that's it.
Wow, what a wonderful piece of advice.
Before we sign off here, what I want to do is mention that I do have my Masterworks book project that I have been diligently working on for many months here. I'm going to be publishing the first volume by the end of this year, and then 2 more volumes after that. It's a 3-volume set that covers all of my career to date, every important thing that I've put together, and all of my philosophy, and lots of stories and road stories and stuff like that. You can go to themystictower.com and look for Dan Harlan's Masterworks and check that out. You'll want to become part of that.
Everyone, please check that out. I'm sure it's a gold mine. Dan, this is such an honor. Thank you so much for spending time with me today, and I wish you the best of luck in your future, my friend.
Thanks so much, LD. Great talking to you.
I love that last piece of advice so much. It's okay to have butterflies in your stomach as long as you let them fly in a formation. So poetic, and it's very true. It's okay to be nervous. It just means you care about what you're doing. But just know that you've got this, and your show is going to be great. I cannot thank Dan Harlan enough for talking to me today. As you heard, he's an amazing man, and I feel very lucky to have had this time with him. You'll feel lucky too if you get a chance to see him in action. Visit Dan's website, danharlanmagic.com, to learn more about him and his shows. Be sure to also visit themystictower.com for unique, mind-blowing magic, as well as Dan's Masterworks book project. And of course, don't forget to rate and review the podcast and share it around. Thanks again for joining me here on Improv and Magic. I'm LD Madeira, and remember that you matter. Take care, my friends.